Live everywhere.
Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, November 22nd, 2019. Ready for another show? Too bad. It's happening anyway. It's Friday, and it's the long haul into the weekend. We'll try and catch up with stories that we haven't been able to squeeze in during the week. I don't know if I have a prediction for stories set to blow up over the weekend or not. I mean, at this point, I'm not really sure what to predict about anything. The impeachment hearings having more or less conclusively proven that the president has committed numerous impeachable crimes, and the Republican Party membership of the U.S. Congress in both houses appears just not to believe that they either happened or that they rise to that level. And they're simply going to stand their ground. I don't know. There's still more to come. I understand, though, that there are, I should say, I understand, for instance, that there may yet be more hearings to come. I'm not certain whether they have yet been scheduled, but I believe I've got a story tucked away in Pocket that we can take a look at that says that Democrats in the House, where they control the agenda, are thinking about bringing forward at least one more hearing or set of hearings that might take a second look, if you will, at the Mueller report and reconsider it in light of what we've heard in the impeachment hearings, the warnings, for instance, from Fiona Hill that the Ukraine issue and the Trump-Russia conundrum, I don't know what to call it, are not separate. And, of course, the conviction in the Roger Stone trial as well, which gives this some new relevance. So we'll take a peek at that perhaps. But Daily Kos Radio is live now. We're out of time. Just as I was late last night, or I maybe should say early this morning, when I realized, oh, yes, I'm going to need a Daily Kos Radio is live now, or not 9 a.m. anyway, post for the morning. And, well, it's reflected in the content of the post. I've got Bill to lean on here. Daily Kos Radio is live now, he reminds you. And let me be clear, I hardly know Kagro X. That's me, David Woolman. How could you hardly know me? It's impossible. We may have spoken once or twice, but other than that, I don't remember him. I'm sure he's a nice guy, but we hardly ever spoke. No quid pro quo. No collusion. No quid pro quo. Here's a picture of Michael Cohen's passport. And we'll be on our way. Thanks very much. Okay. So I guess Trump is awake and tweeting. I don't actually follow him directly. Usually I just depend on everybody else to comment on or retweet his most obnoxious morning tweets, but I guess that's the case. I don't know. Is he up? Is he speaking or is he tweeting? I don't know. I guess I'll just take a peek. Maybe this is the most convenient way of doing it, is looking at the Hill's reporting on it. Trump calls Sondland allegations total nonsense. Is that it looks like he must have called into Fox and Friends. That must be it. So he's been on the whining snowflake path, not the war path. It doesn't feel anything like that. So I've missed out on that, but I think Daniel Dale has been covering it contemporaneously. It's not really much that I can mine from that, I don't think. Let me take a look over in Pocket to see if I can find. Yes, there it is. A Politico piece that I think I must have picked up from Greg's retweeting it late last night, early this morning. I don't know. Impeachment is about to get a Robert Mueller is it reprise or reprise? I don't know how to pronounce that word in all this time. I guess I'm going to go with reprise. Reprise seems a little stuffy to me. Let's look that up. Can I just do that, or can you just tell me? How about that? am just curious why that sticks in my... Are there two acceptable pronunciations? Is that it? It says here the usual pronunciation is reprise. Okay. But I'm guessing that, I don't know. Who cares? That's stupid. I don't want to get distracted by that. I want to get distracted by what Politico has determined is the content most likely to distract me for the requisite number of minutes to monetize their content. And it is here. Impeachment is about to get a Robert Mueller, well, now, this time we'll say reprise, because now we've covered both bases. Now that the Ukraine hearings are over, and I'm not certain that they are for good, but no more are scheduled, Democrats want to hold at least one Mueller-related impeachment hearing on Trump's possible obstruction and perjury. That might be a good idea. The piece begins, it's Darren Samuelson on the byline here. Right now, impeachment is all about Ukraine. Shouldn't be. Fiona Hill told us so much. But after Thanksgiving, prepare for a Robert Mueller, here we are again, reprise. Not reprieve, reprise. Now that House Democrats have wrapped up public hearings on President Donald Trump's pressure campaign to get Ukraine to launch politically advantageous investigations, or rather announce them, would be a more accurate summation, I think. There are plans to hold at least one public impeachment hearing on Trump's misdeeds as alleged in the special counsel's report. It's a gathering that could fuel articles of impeachment beyond those tied to the Ukraine controversy. Democrats say they have new Mueller-related fodder after Roger Stone's recent trial raised questions about whether Trump provided false statements to the special counsel's team. And the hearing could even feature a star witness, former White House counsel Don McGahn. I don't know how he plans to star in it. He probably plans not to. I don't know what we're going to get from him. It's an open question. A judge is set to rule in the coming days on whether McGahn must comply with a House subpoena. That will answer the question, I guess. The House leadership signaled the plans in court filings and oral arguments this week as the Democrats' attorneys fought to get McGahn's testimony as well as access to more of the evidence Mueller used to write his final report. Okay. So, by the way, I think you can pretty much write the obituary of the United States of America if the courts finally just land on, yeah, you can't subpoena anybody that the White House tells you can't, and you can't have the grand jury testimony, and Republicans will never vote to remove him from office in the Senate. So, we have to go through with it. We got to bury the body, just in case it rises up in a zombie resurgence at the last minute. But it will be a sad day, to say the least. House leadership signaled the plans in court filings and oral arguments this week, right? We already said this much as Democratic attorneys, the House Democrats attorneys, fought to get McGahn's testimony. More stuff from Mueller. There is something that's unbelievably serious, this is, and it's happening right now very fast. House counsel Doug Letter, who consults closely with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, told a federal appeals court during a hearing in the Mueller evidence case. To close observers, a shift back to the Mueller probe isn't all that surprising. I think that's true. Democratic leaders never took the 2016 Russia investigation off the table as an impeachment springboard, even as attention shifted to the Ukraine scandal. Much of Mueller's work is already part of the Democrats' impeachment record. The former special counsel and his final report are mentioned a dozen times in the House resolution approved last month, kickstarting the current public hearing process. Democrats noted in the resolution that Mueller documented evidence strongly indicating, that President Trump engaged in a course of conduct designed to obstruct the special counsel's investigation, including any investigation into the president's conduct. Well, he did. Democrats have picked up new details since then. At Stone's trial, which concluded November 15th with a conviction of the longtime Trump associate for lying to Congress and witness tampering, new evidence and testimony showed Trump and his campaign aides knew more about WikiLeaks' plans during the 2016 presidential race than they have let on. That includes 3 Trump-Stone phone calls around the time that Julian Assange's document dumps were damaging the Hillary Clinton campaign. Democrats say the revelations spotlight a potential contradiction in Trump's written responses last November to Mueller's team. I do not recall discussing WikiLeaks with Stone, nor do I recall being aware of Mr. Stone having discussed WikiLeaks with individuals associated with my campaign, Trump wrote, supposedly. Democrats have been arguing in court that they deserve access to Mueller's underlying evidence in order to determine whether Trump actually did lie. He did. The letter, and letter, that's the problem with having your counsel be named Doug Letter. Anyway, let's see. Oh, somebody has found this for me. I'll have to change gears later on. Okay. Democrats have been arguing that they deserve access to the Mueller evidence, right? Doug Letter, the top House counsel, told the federal appeals court on Monday that the House needs a swift resolution because of the impeachment time crunch. Similar arguments came up in a separate House lawsuit Democrats launched in an attempt to force McGahn to testify. In a court filing on Tuesday, Letter stressed the urgent schedule, writing that the Judiciary Committee plans to have its own round of impeachment hearings after the public Ukraine hearings conclude. Democrats, he wrote, would aim to obtain Mr. McGahn's testimony at that time, meaning there is an urgent need for a final resolution of the matter now, pending... I say you would need it now, but it's the matter now pending before this court, but it's the same effect. It appears Democrats will get the speedy decision they want. That's good news. U.S. District Court Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Ketanji. I added an extra N there. Ketanji, in case you're following along at home. Judge Jackson this week promised a ruling by Monday on the McGahn lawsuit. That's good news. But even if McGahn is ordered to testify, that ruling could be put on hold until any appeals are sorted out. And a source close to McGahn said the ex-Trump aide won't agree to testify until that process is worked out, possibly delaying things yet again. You can be pretty sure of that. The lawsuit seeking Mueller's evidence faces a long timeline, too. While Democrats won a lower court ruling in the case, a hearing is scheduled for January 3rd to consider whether that ruling should stand. Trump's Justice Department, should it lose there, can also try to appeal to a full panel of judges to review the case. Remember, the en banc rehearing. I guess, by the way, I'll pause here and just say, I'm not sure how I think it will come out in the end, but having a delay caused by the courts that keeps the impeachment inquiries active for a little while longer is not a bad thing. Although I would suggest that the Democratic leadership might be interested, or rather I should say the objective fact finders at the relevant committees, which happen to be the majority Democrat and run by Democrats, but represent, of course, standing committees of the Congress of the United States. I would suggest that perhaps they want to think about ways to keep the momentum going as much as it can be kept going while we wait for the resolution of these court cases, rather than let impeachment disappear from the front pages while we wait months at a time for the courts to sort this stuff out and give us our second opportunity to hold hearings. Anyway, in the end, both cases could end up at the Supreme Court, Politico continues, putting a final resolution outside Democrats' preferred impeachment window. Possibly true. I think that might be asking a lot for the American people to continue to go through impeachment for another 6 to 8 months as we move forward toward a presidential election. Representative Hank Johnson, Democrat of Georgia, a senior member of the Judiciary Committee, told Politico, I don't think the American people want that. No, nobody wants any of this, but it has to happen. Representative Pramila Jayapal, Democrat of Washington, of course, another Judiciary Committee member, said in an interview that lawmakers can move forward on Mueller-related articles of impeachment without final judgments in the case. I think that's true, too. Maybe a good strategy. It's going to be challenging depending on the timing, but we do have a lot of evidence in front of us, and we'll move forward with whatever we have based on the timing we have, Jayapal said. Hopefully, the courts continue to act quickly. While they intend to lean in on the Mueller issue in the coming weeks, Democrats still haven't made a final decision on whether to include any impeachment articles tied to the special counsel's findings. That, to me, is the million-dollar question, said a person close to the House impeachment process. Well, here's $1 million. Do it. The challenge, this person said, revolves around turning all the public evidence from Mueller's probe into one or more impeachment articles that can win a majority vote on the floor. Is there a way to quickly process and dispose of that in this concise schedule? I'm not sure I know of a way, but there may be one, the person added. Pelosi's plan has been for the House leadership to be an impeachment clearinghouse after 6 committees, Intelligence, Judiciary, Oversight and Reform, Foreign Affairs, Financial Services, and Ways and Means, complete their review of allegations of presidential misdeeds and abuses of power. I think that's an interesting statement all by itself, that it took 6 committees to look into the vast array of alleged presidential misdeeds and abuses of power, as they put it here. They are all over the place. In addition to those investigated by the Mueller probe and those investigated just recently in the Intelligence Committee with regard to Ukraine, there's, of course, there's the Russia stuff. There's many aspects of the Russia stuff. There's emoluments of all sorts from all sorts of sources, domestic and foreign. There are the taxes that have yet to be revealed. There's the accounting information that has yet to be revealed. There's I haven't really been looking at it too closely, but really they should be looking at the GAO's decision to lease the old post office to Trump for the creation of his hotel. That in itself is problematic and needed to be looked into. There are the money laundering charges that need to be sorted out. There are other foreign affairs issues besides the way we dealt with Ukraine that need to be looked into. The Jamal Khashoggi murder, do we have anything there? Needs to be sorted out. And how many other countries might Trump be extorting in exchange for dirt on opponents? We already know that he's been out there insisting that he believes that China should be subject to the same pressure to produce information about the Biden family that would be useful to him in his campaign. So how many more are out there? Is this not standard? We need to find out if this might be standard instructions to his diplomats everywhere. Find me dirt. All right, we'll continue on here. Ultimately, the Judiciary Panel, which spent the bulk of its time in 2019 examining Mueller's work, will vote on any eventual articles of impeachment. Any upcoming hearings on the committee, which is led by Chairman Jerry Nadler, likely would follow the same model the Intelligence Committee used in its Ukraine hearings and feature questioning by staff counsel. Trump's GOP allies on Capitol Hill say they are not alarmed about a shift on the impeachment front back to the Mueller probe, a topic they've trashed since long before the special counsel's findings were made public. The American people are so done with all this stuff. Representative Jim Jordan, that's for rape, Ohio, Trump's most valuable defender in the Ukraine hearings, said in an interview, "It's been one thing after another, and nothing ever works the way the Democrats promise it's going to work." The transition in the impeachment proceedings back to the special counsel's work also shouldn't be that jarring, considering the Russia probe's fingerprints are all over the Ukraine scandal. That's true, too. Trump's personal attorney in the Russia probe, Rudy Giuliani, started pushing earlier this year for Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, a potential Trump 2020 rival, and his son Hunter as the special counsel's work wrapped up. Then, with Trump's backing, Giuliani started working with some U.S. diplomats to get Ukraine to launch such a probe, or at least announce one, as well as a probe into discredited theories that Ukraine had framed Russia for political hacks during the 2016 election. That's a point we need to return to, and we will, perhaps right after this. On July 25th, of course, Trump asked Ukraine President Vladimir Zelensky to open these investigations. Again, to be clear, he demanded, really, but he asked, we'll say, for sake of politeness, Zelensky to personally announce publicly on television, on American television, CNN, that these investigations had been opened. I mean, that's a different thing than I want you to do these investigations. I want you to personally put your reputation as the newly elected, overwhelmingly elected, president of Ukraine on the line in personally announcing that these investigations are taking place. That personal stake in it is the guarantee Trump was looking for, that he would get what he wanted. And really, there's no reason in the world. I don't know how the Ukrainians have structured their government, but I can't really think of any reason offhand in a normal governmental structure where there's an elected president who's head of state and a parliament and prime minister who run government, why the president of the country would have to be the one, would ever be the one to personally announce the launch of any kind of investigation in Ukraine, no matter what the origin was. I don't think the president really would have any role in that. But in America, we wouldn't know that, and this was made for an American audience, this idea. Trump's defense in the Ukraine matters mirror his response to the special counsel probe, including his on-again, off-again offer to give sworn testimony and assertions that as president he can act however he wants without legal consequences. And I think that's about the best summation of his position I've seen. I don't know whether I've noticed other reporters using the same, but that's about as bold a statement of it as he's ever made, and as you can expect to get. But he really does believe that. They haven't glossed over anything. His assertion that as president he can act however he wants without legal consequences. Some members of Mueller's team have even popped back up to needle the president over the Ukraine investigation. Andrew Weissman, who served as a lead investigator and prosecutor during Mueller's Russia probe, recently signed on as an MSNBC legal commentator and has been giving his thoughts on the recent House impeachment hearings. And I guess a quote from Weissman here is, if it is true what the Democrats are claiming, what the president is doing is completely antithetical to the bipartisan view that the rule of law should apply in this country and across the world, Weissman told NPR last weekend. Democrats' efforts to reveal more about the Mueller probe also may live on beyond the House impeachment effort, which party leaders appear intent on completing by year's end, for some reason. It's still very important that we pursue it, even though it may not be in any accord with any timeline that continues to develop in terms of impeachment based on the Ukrainian matter. Wow, Johnson said. That's a strange construction. History needs to know what Congress did to confront the abuse of power that was right up under its nose. That's all true. Why mention that you might want to back off because the American people are getting tired? I really don't know. Why do you think they're tired of it? I really don't know that either. I can't think of a really good reason. So I was talking about I paused over, I guess, the transition paragraph between Russia and Ukraine. I mean, I think you all are pretty aware of the connections between the two cases, but I wanted to highlight for you a few other takes, let's say, on that situation. First of all, there was this morning's tweet thread. It is this morning's, isn't it? From Mark Sumner on the subject. I actually retweeted the last tweet in the chain. That one was most significant to me. But let me go back to the top here. Only about an hour old. Mark tweeting that the biggest mistake in the impeachment hearings is the failure to make clear that every time someone brought up investigations, quote, into the 2016 election, what was really meant was a conspiracy theory that shifted blame from Vladimir Putin to Hillary Clinton. I mean, that's a very good clarification of it. And Republicans did the best they could to just refer to things in shorthand so that you would never really stop and think about the fact that what they're really saying here is that what happened in the 2016 election, allegations that the DNC's computers were hacked and the documents were dumped and made public, their theory is that Hillary Clinton did that to herself to set up Russia and the Trump campaign, and that they were aided in doing so by Ukraine. That's the actual theory. Trump, he continues, wasn't asking for people to look into why someone wrote an op-ed he didn't like or said something nasty on a Facebook page or any of the other items that Devin Nunes ran through again and again. None of that was at all part of what Trump demanded. Trump's demand, as made clear on his call to Zelensky, was that the Ukrainians lend credence to the CrowdStrike theory. That is a theory that says Russia never hacked the DNC servers at all. Instead, the whole thing was a fake-out arranged by Clinton and a Ukrainian cabal. It's because Trump was insisting on this ludicrous conspiracy theory, and because Nunes and others had said things over the course of the hearing in support of this conspiracy theory, that Fiona Hill made a statement saying that the Republicans on the committee believed Russia wasn't involved. Her scorn had nothing to do with not being aware of Nunes' weak-ass pro-Trump report. It had to do with the conspiracy theory Trump and they have been pushing, because that conspiracy theory explicitly says the Russians were not involved. It repudiates their own report. There's more to this, and we'll give the fabulous conclusion of this tweet thread in just 2 minutes while we stop and catch our breath. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's continue on. I'll pick up once again with Mark Sumner's tweet thread here. But remember or maybe we need to recap the whole thing here just to do it all on one side of the break. But it began with the comment that the biggest mistake in the impeachment hearings is the failure to make clear that every time someone brought up investigations into the 2016 election, what they really meant was that they were looking for what Trump was looking for. They were looking for what Trump was looking for, which was corroboration, manufactured or not, from Ukraine that what really happened in 2016 was not that the Russians hacked the DNC and did anything with the information that they got, but rather that Hillary Clinton, this is their theory, this is their actual theory. They've promoted it throughout the impeachment hearings. They get embarrassed about it when you lay it out like on its face, which is why Mark says this was a big mistake not to spend time doing this, that every time, Elise Stefanik, Jim Jordan, anybody, Ratcliffe, Nunes, said all that the president wanted here, there's no problem here. Even if there was a quid pro quo, he's asking for a legitimate thing. Investigations into the 2016 election. That's a legitimate, people have questions. We just want an investigation into what happened in the 2016 election. What they were really saying, just as we want an investigation of Burisma was code for we want an investigation of the Bidens, we want an investigation into the 2016 elections was code for we want you to say that Russia never hacked the DNC, but rather that Hillary Clinton faked the hacking with Ukrainian cooperation so that it would look like Trump cheated. And they thought they could frame Russia for doing it for reasons unknown. They just seemed like a good movie script villain. That the Russians, who at that point probably still no Democrats were thinking of. We were still thinking of Russia in terms of having ridiculed Mitt Romney for having called it out as being the biggest geopolitical threat in the world. And I guess he was right about that. But when they say, I think they're embarrassed to say up front that, yes, what we think really happened here is that Russia never did anything wrong. Ukraine and Hillary Clinton. And I think they're hoping that you will think, that the viewing public will think, well, we're not saying that we're saying that the Russians didn't hack the DNC servers, but the Ukrainians did. And it's easy to make that mistake, mistaking Ukrainians for Russians or Russians for Ukrainians. But the theory actually is that Hillary Clinton either did the hacking or arranged for the hacking herself. I don't know what that means personally, or had aides do it, or faked the hacking. And in order to cover the tracks of the fake hacking, took, and this is their formulation of it, took the server as though it were one singular physical object and hid it away from prying eyes in Ukraine so that fine, upstanding American Republican investigators seeking to prove that she faked the hack wouldn't be able to lay their hands on this singular physical object server because it had been spirited away to Ukraine, safely kept in the hands of Hillary Clinton's co-conspirators. That's the actual theory. All right? But that's embarrassing even to Republicans. So instead they say, investigations into what happened in the 2016 election. Everyone believes something happened in the 2016 election, right? What that thing is, we may have differences of opinion about, but everyone believes something happened. We believe that what happened is Hillary Clinton faked the whole thing and stored the server in Ukraine, and now we need to get to the bottom of it. So that's a good reminder that Mark gives us, that we didn't spend enough time telling everybody every time they say investigations into the 2016 election. What they mean is the crazy conspiracy theory that's not only stupid sounding, but hasn't even got a kernel of truth anywhere that you can point to, that Hillary Clinton faked the whole thing, and in order to cover up her fakery, hid some piece of computer equipment in Ukraine. And if President Zelensky would just get that piece of equipment for us, the Republicans would be able to prove the whole thing. But who knows why? We can't get a hold of it. It must just be because of the deep state conspiracy, both here and in Ukraine. They just won't give us this server that, doesn't exist. So we're stuck in one of those you can't prove a negative sort of things, right? We can't prove that the server doesn't show that Hillary Clinton faked it because the server isn't a thing, and we'll never get it out of the Ukrainians because they haven't got it, whatever it is supposed to be. But anyway, back to Mark's concluding couple of tweets. We'll give you these 3 or 4 in a straight shot here. It's because Trump was insisting on this ludicrous conspiracy theory, and because Nunes and others had said things over the course of the hearing in support of this conspiracy theory, that Fiona Hill began yesterday with her statement saying the Republicans on the committee believed Russia wasn't involved. Her scorn had nothing to do with not being aware of Nunes's stupid pro-Trump report, because that was the rebuttal from the Republicans. They said, of course we don't really believe, they were embarrassed to say they don't really believe Russia wasn't involved, because everybody kind of does believe that, and all the evidence points there. So I know I heard at least Stefanik saying, well, see, we produced the report that said, okay, Russia did some hacking back in 2016. And Nunes put his name on it. That was before control of the House, and therefore the Intelligence Committee passed into Democratic hands by virtue of the results of the 2018 election. Nunes and the Republicans put out a report that said grudgingly, Russia did some hacking. So whenever you would say, no, this idea of investigations into the 2016 election is your code for Hillary Clinton did it and hid the evidence in Ukraine, and we know you, and we've got you dead to rights, just give it up. They would say, well, that's not true. We said Russia did something in that stupid report. So, the Republicans yesterday were saying, Fiona Hill is wrong about this. She says we don't believe Russia ever did anything wrong ever in their whole existence with respect to the 2016 election. But her warning not to fall for Russian propaganda here has nothing to do with the fact that she hadn't heard, she had heard. Has nothing to do with not hearing about the Nunes report. She had heard about the Nunes report. It just was stupid and didn't conclude anything. What it had to do with was the conspiracy theory that Trump and the Republicans have been pushing. This how dumb is it idea that Hillary Clinton did it and covered it up by hiding computer equipment in Ukraine. Because that conspiracy theory, Mark writes, explicitly says the Russians were not involved. It repudiates their own report. Republicans on the committee purport to hold two diametrically opposed beliefs. And there's more evidence than just what Mark has in his tweet thread for this fact. It may be, in fact, the same diametrically opposed beliefs that they hold at the same time. But they want Americans to believe that they both, for the Q conspiracy theorists out there, they need to hold on to them. Wink, wink. We believe that Hillary Clinton faked it and hid the server in Ukraine, and CrowdStrike and the oligarchs who own it, who actually don't own it, are helping Hillary hide this evidence. And we also believe at the same time that our report on Russian interference in 2016 is correct. That they meddled, but it didn't make any difference, or yada yada, something, and they tried to hack something and didn't get anything really important, but they didn't hack this thing that everybody's focusing on. So we know Russia did something. We're not crazy, That's the cover they're hoping for from the Nunes report. As Republicans were beating their own chests on Thursday, claiming they did too believe in Russian interference in 2016, Trump, Barr, Nunes, and others are actively out there trying to prove exactly the opposite. And his conclusion, and while it's understandable that no one wanted to use their 5 minutes, the members, to unwind this ridiculous Hillary hacked herself and hid the server in Ukraine theory, that William Barr is currently spending all sorts of taxpayer money chasing around the world, not taking that time allowed Republicans to extend the nonsense. And so they did, and now everyone is sort of stuck with that, although they may get another bite at the apple at some point to try and address this. I would transition at this point to something I've just been taking notice of, I guess, clips from this morning's call into Fox and Friends. Josh Marshall has a clip up. I haven't heard the clip, but he comments on it saying this, and it looks relevant to what we're talking about. Remember, CrowdStrike is the conspiracy theory that Ukraine and the DNC framed Russia. Here's President Trump, again, pushing this claim, supported by Republicans, or rather, I'll read it this way. Here's President Trump, again, pushing this claim, which is supported by Republicans, that Russia is innocent, didn't interfere in the 2016 election. Who did it? Ukraine and the DNC. And maybe what I can do, I'll get this, I'll open up this tweet and I'll put it in Pocket, and then I can say, how long is this clip of him doing this? How long does he talk? Come on, where's the part when I scroll over that gives me the numbers? 48 seconds. Might be able to get away with playing that. Should we listen to it? Might as well, right? What's in... Can I bring it up here? from, I'd have to refresh Pocket, I think. Did I not get it in there yet? Why didn't this pocketize? Let's try that again. Save to Pocket, and if I open it up on the main computer, there we are. Josh Marshall's tweet of, they've reformatted the way you move from Pocket to the original here. All right, let's see. Will this come up in, I got to raise the
DNC,
audio.
Democratic.
Let's start over here. Okay, let's roll it. Go ahead.
Have the server, right, from the DNC, Democratic National Committee.
Who has the server?
Now, the FBI went in and they told him, get out of here. You're not getting it. We're not giving it to you. They gave the server to CrowdStrike or whatever it's called, which is a company owned by a very wealthy Ukrainian. And I still want to see that server. You know, the FBI has never gotten that server. That's a big part of this whole thing.
All right, so there's the President of the United States ranting on television about this. Again, as I understand it, the server isn't a single physical object that can be removed and sent to Ukraine or turned over to him for his examination or anything like that. CrowdStrike, I think, is owned, if I recall correctly, CrowdStrike is owned by an American, but perhaps an American of Ukrainian origin, just like Lev Parnas might be considered to be, but has nothing to do with the Ukrainian government. There's no reason to believe any computer equipment was spirited away in any sense, but this is the, QAnon level theory of the case, and Trump appears to believe it, or is at least willing to go on television in public claiming that he does by way of defense. Let's continue. It looks like the Fox friends are about to say something in all of this, like, you must be exactly right, sir.
Why did they give it to a Ukrainian company?
Are you sure they did that? Are you sure they gave it to Ukraine?
Well, that's what the word is, and that's what I asked actually in my phone call, if you know.
Right. So there you go. I mean, really, honestly, can I just pause it there for a second? He's just asked point blank by the Fox and Friends people, are you sure of what you're talking about? Well, many people are saying it. That's what they say. That's what they say. Many people, they're talking about it. And that was what I asked about in my phone call, if you recall. And yeah, I mean, again, that's damning really all by itself, quite honestly. Forget the quid pro quo. Forget who exchanged what for what. Although I have more to say about that, of course. But just pause for a second and realize the theory they're talking about is crazy ass bull, and the President of the United States, his defense of his conduct in this damning record of the phone call that he's released, is that the President of the United States is calling other world leaders, basically calling them up and saying, hey, let me let you in on a little secret here. The President of the United States is a Looney Tunes. He's an idiot that will believe anything. Anything. Can you believe it? And guess what? I'm going to make you crazy too. I'm going to make you look crazy. That's how I'm going to deal with it. How can we live in a world with a so-called leader of the free world? And it's not Angela Merkel, I can tell you that. That's for sure. Crazy old broad. How can we live in a world where the leader of the free world is a complete, fruit bat? I don't know what do you want to say anymore. For some reason, I wanted to say Frito Bandito for a second. That doesn't really describe anything. How can we live in a world where the leader of the free world is a complete lunatic? Did you hear that for a second there? Donald Trump got a frog in his throat. Don't you wish that would really happen? And it was like a gigantic bullfrog, and he choked to death, perhaps. Maybe that's just me. Not you. I'm not putting that on you. You can all go, with a clean conscience. You didn't wish death on him. That was me, the radio guy I was listening to. But the idea here is if the leader of the free world is crazy, the only way that we can set things right is if every leader in the world is also crazy. Or I'm going to make you look crazier than me. Watch this. You're going to investigate this. I'm just spouting it like an idiot, but you're going to spend your actual government's time and money on it in furtherance of my conspiracy. Why should I spend American taxpayer dollars on it? I'm saving money. That's all I'm doing. I'm saving the American taxpayers' money by making Ukraine pay for it. That's all. So, but he's just said, I call other world leaders fairly regularly, especially when they're just elected. And the thing I like to do when they're just elected is say, you know what? You are going to serve as president of your nation during a time when the president of the United States of America is a complete lunatic and moron. How do you like that? How do you like them apples? Do you like apples? I hate apples. They're natural. They're disgusting. Potato chips really are delicious. That's the direction I would go if I were you. Just coaching you a little bit there. So Fox and Friends asks him point blank, do you believe this? And he says, people are saying it. He won't say, I believe this. It's too embarrassing for him to say. I don't believe this. But people are saying it, and I want to satisfy those fine, upstanding American people. Maybe that's it. We got a couple more seconds of tape to roll here, too.
I mean, I asked it very point blank because we're looking for corruption. There's tremendous corruption. We're looking for, why should we be giving hundreds of millions of dollars to countries when there's this kind of corruption?
Total non sequitur there at the end, of course, because Trump has scrambled eggs for brains. And in addition, he knows that he hasn't got a case to lay out here. But he also is a total moron and a scatterbrain. And what he says here is, in response to the question, do you really believe the crap you're saying right now? I don't know. People are saying it. And then the thing is, why should there be corruption? Corruption is bad. Everybody believes that, right? Can't we all agree that corruption is bad? Well, if they did this thing, which I don't know if they did, people are saying it. We just want to find out. If they did this thing, that's corruption. And if there's corruption, why should the American taxpayer be paying money into a country where there's corruption? Why should we give money to a country where the leadership, for instance, is so crazy that they actually believe that there's a reason to investigate CrowdStrike or whatever its name is, right? That would be nuts. But aren't you asking Americans to spend money on that now? And no, that's the point. I'm trying to save Americans money by asking other countries to spend their money on it, even though we're giving them money. Why should we give them money if they're only going to do the things we ask them to do? Hold on a minute. Just wait. I got to think this one through. That's not going to happen. So he just switches subjects. Do you really believe the crap you just said? Well, corruption, that's bad, right? And we don't want the corruption out there. So that is the thing that I'm saying instead. And I don't know where the conversation goes from there, but I guess everybody else does because they're listening to it live and in real time. Brian Beutler had commented on this, probably what I just basically commented, but this is where I was going to go originally. He commenting on Josh Marshall's tweet, which, again, I'll remind you, says, remember, CrowdStrike is the conspiracy theory that Ukraine and the DNC framed Russia. Here's President Trump again pushing this claim, supported by Republicans, that Russia is innocent, didn't interfere in the 2016 election. Who did it? Ukraine and the DNC. My important point here, he's asked point blank, do you really believe what you're saying? And he says, different thing, something about corruption, and then transitions out to I don't know what. Brian points out this is where you can spot the lie in the GOPs whining about how it's no fair to say they deny Russian interference in 2016. The conspiracy theory they just spent 2 weeks peddling includes the notion that Ukraine framed Russia for 2016. If they framed Russia for 2016, of course, then Russia didn't do it. That's what framing means, right? So they have to be sitting there saying that Russia didn't do it. Thank you. Rebecca is doing some production assistance for us in the background. FYI, she says, the American that owns CrowdStrike is of Russian ancestry, not Ukrainian. Thank you. That's an important point. And they do, the whole thing depends on our confusion about the difference between the two. And sometimes there is no difference. Not that, that a Ukrainian person, like that's not a real nationality or anything, but rather, there's this confusing issue of pro-Russian Ukrainians that makes things even more confusing. Why would a Ukrainian do this pro-Russian thing? Well, because they are pro-Russian in their bent. Like, is Donald Trump pro-Russian in his bent? Yes. Is he an American or a Russian? Easier to tell, right? But not so much necessarily as between Ukraine and Russia, particularly when most of us grew up during an era in which Ukraine, or as some of us still accidentally call it, the Ukraine, was merely a province of the Soviet Union. Even though I guess for the bulk of its history, Ukraine was a proud independent nation, we came to think of it very differently from whenever. I guess since, and I guess it's been a province of greater, was it a province in Tsarist Russia as well? Probably for the last 100 years of Tsarist Russia, and then into the Soviet era, and it wasn't until post-Soviet era that it reasserted its independence. I'm thinking off the top of my head. Okay, so thanks for clearing that up for us, Rebecca. I guess I would add to this my own pet reminder theory thing. What is it? It's not a theory. It actually happened. But my pet project is to remind everybody, there we go, that way back in 2016, since we're investigating what happened in 2016, let's not forget that in June of 2016, there was, of course, the secretly taped conversation among the House Republican leaders, which became famous for Kevin McCarthy saying that he thought Putin paid Trump, but which I remind you is a conversation about Russia and Ukraine, and in particular about the difficulties that Ukraine was having and their awareness, their personal awareness. Kevin McCarthy, Paul Ryan, Kathy McMorris Rogers, Steve Scalise, Kevin McCarthy, now Republican leader of the House, their personal knowledge and understanding and acknowledgement of the situation in Ukraine for McCarthy, because he had just come from a meeting with the then newly elected Ukrainian prime minister, wherein the prime minister told him directly, point blank, face to face about this. The discussion, the bulk of the discussion, is about what Paul Ryan calls the maniacal program of Russian, not only warfare in Ukraine, but of propaganda in Ukraine and across the greater West, which they theorize has spread to most of Europe, and we may theorize was on its way at that point to America. It was, of course. They don't acknowledge it explicitly in their conversation, but they do explicitly acknowledge the maniacal nature of Russian propaganda and how they are seeking to turn Ukraine against itself, funding the populists there to try to install a pro-Russian government where they could, seeing it defeated, I guess, in 2014, responding with military aggression and this maniacal program of propaganda. They are acknowledging throughout the entirety of the conversation how effective it is. And of course, we are now warned by Fiona Hill and others, but Fiona Hill, the latest to renew the warning, that Russia is actively working to divide Ukraine against itself. Fiona Hill, of course, noting that they're actively working to divide Americans against themselves. But Kevin McCarthy, Scalise, McMorris, Rogers, Ryan, and others acknowledge in their 2016 conversation that Russia is doing a bang-up job in not only turning Ukraine against itself, but making Ukraine doubt everything in terms of what news it sees on its television, or what views of Ukraine are reflected around the world thanks to what Russians are doing in their propaganda program across the West. They're clearly acknowledging the power of this propaganda and its ability to make otherwise rational people believe very, very stupid things about both Ukraine and Russia. And now here we are 3.5 years later. Republicans themselves, the people who said, watch out for Russia's ability to make you think stupid, backward things about Russia and Ukraine, and to think up is down and black is white with respect to these two countries, now say, no, we've got it here. Russia's not doing anything, and Ukraine is doing it all. Now, our intelligence community says the exact opposite. But Republicans who said on tape in June of 2016 that they were aware that this was happening, now take the opposite position. Russia didn't do anything. They don't have a maniacal program of propaganda operating with respect to Ukraine. Ukraine has a maniacal propaganda program operating with respect to itself. And they're trying to frame Russia, which is innocent and does nothing, for having framed up all this propaganda. It's really, not only did Hillary Clinton hack herself and hand the server to Ukraine, but Ukraine propagandized itself and pinned the blame on Russia. Do you really believe that? Why? Is that bad? Is that crazy? Well, in that case, in 2016, Devin Nunes put out or 2018, I guess, Devin Nunes put out a report that says the opposite. Is that what you wanted to hear from us? Is that good? Are we not crazy now? Okay. If that's the case, then that's what we believe. Right? So that's where we stand now. By the way, I was saying that again this morning and pointing that out for people that, no, that's the case. Don't forget that that's what they were actually talking about. It wasn't about Putin pays Trump. Don't make that mistake again. And I went to attach a link to the Washington Post's copy of the transcript so that people could reread it. I always urge people to reread that transcript. And I did find, interestingly enough, it seems to be gone from the Washington Post website. What bad timing that is. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It is extraordinarily bad timing, don't you think? By the way, I also see that Anna Marie Cox was watching Josh Marshall watch the president on Fox and Friends. And let's see, in this segment, there's even more fun stuff. She's asking, is this even true? Josh Marshall says, Trump is saying, with regard to Marie Yovanovitch, she wouldn't hang my picture in the embassy. She's in charge of the embassy. She wouldn't hang it. It took a year and a half, 2 years, to get the picture up. She said bad things about me. This was not an angel, this woman, okay? Which is, of course, standard play now for Republicans. Anytime they get a hold of somebody who's bad in their eyes but might be sympathetic otherwise in some other eyes, it's no angel. Everybody's no angel. Is this even true? I mean, good question. Anna Marie Cox. Answer, probably no. Almost certain that you would find, I guess if you, I don't know what would happen. If you asked people who traveled to Ukraine as members of Congress in the past couple of years, and when you were in the embassy, did you happen to notice that the president did not have his portrait hung anywhere in the embassy? And of course, if it was up on the wall, I suppose that there are probably a number of Republicans who would say, I actually don't remember seeing the picture. And when it would be pretty obvious, the first, they put it in a pretty prominent place. Not that it matters very much in realistic terms, but no, I think the point here is that Anna Marie Cox is entirely right. It's probably not even close to true, and it's probably already been debunked by the time I read it. And this is about an hour ago that Josh Marshall tweeted this clip. I don't know when the president said it. It might have been, you might be able to tell by playing the clip and looking at the time stamp down there. But anyway, the point is it's probably already been debunked because there's almost no chance that it is true. It would be a ridiculous thing to do and a ridiculous way of resisting Trump's administration, even if it were true. It's ineffective and does nothing. So I highly doubt it. Let me mark this one, I guess, also so that we can show that one around in the roundup today. Just to sum up what I was thinking about what Mark Sumner kicked off this morning, I guess I sum it up this way, though, as I tweeted in the morning. The whole Republican theory of the case in the impeachment hearings, everything they did for the past couple of weeks, the theory, as he says, as Josh says, as Brian Beutler says, the whole theory that they pinned their performance in the impeachment hearings to was that not only that Russia didn't do anything and Ukraine did it all, or helped Hillary Clinton fake the hacking and then covered it up for her. That's the most direct formulation of what they're saying. What I want to point out with respect to the June 2016 conversation is that the whole Republican theory of the case in the impeachment hearings is that everything is the opposite of what Republican leaders said on tape in 2016. That conversation, again, was not about whether or not Putin pays Trump. It was about their firm belief, based on having just spoken to the then newly elected Prime Minister of Ukraine, their belief that Russian propaganda was in operation in Ukraine and throughout the West. That was a disinformation campaign, aimed at upending their governments and ours and governments across Europe, and B, replacing the truth with Russian propaganda. And it was so effective and so maniacal, it had Paul Ryan and Kathy McMorris Rogers and others there freaked out. We almost left out Patrick McHenry, who I don't know if he has anything to say in the conversation until the very end, but he's also there. And again, Steve Scalise, who's still there as well. But yeah, that the whole conversation about how insane it is what Russia's getting away with in Ukraine, making people in Ukraine and around the world believe backwards and upside down things about Ukraine, about Russia, and about who's doing what. And then between 2016 and 2019, when we say, you know what, you're right, there's all kinds of proof that the Russians are doing terrible things with their propaganda and feeding people the opposite of truth. And guess what? Some people here in the United States fell for it in various ways and in big ways. And look what we found. They now say, oh, you know what we really meant? What we really meant is Russia is not doing anything at all. It's not that their propaganda is so effective in making us believe that Ukraine did it and that Russia didn't, but the fact is that Russia didn't do it. Now, Russia is putting out all sorts of information saying that they didn't do it and Ukraine did, and we believe that, but we also believed 3 years ago that they had a maniacal plan of propaganda that made people think up was down and black was white. But that didn't work on us. We just independently came to the conclusion, opposite the conclusion we came to in 2016 when the then brand new Ukrainian prime minister came to speak to us. Remember, when you go back, and you can go and still find the transcript on the Internet Archive, thankfully, but for whatever reason, my source for going to the transcript was always to search for, Putin pays Trump, McCarthy, Ryan, and that brings up the Washington Post article about the conversation. And inside the article is a link to, a page that says, it's a call out from the article. Read the transcript that this article is based on. You click on it, it would bring you to the Washington Post's pages where they had the thing embedded in Scribd format. I don't know, it was actual Scribd, but similar to Scribd anyway. That sort of scrollable PDF-ish format. And then when I went there today, the article is easy enough to find. The link is still in there, just the link is dead, which is bad news. But of course, you can find it on the Wayback Machine. And so again, I'll just remind you, not only is the conversation not about the last thing that happens in which McCarthy delivers his line about, I think Putin pays Trump, and then they all laugh and say, let's keep it a secret. Look at the very beginning. The whole conversation is premised on the, at first, unidentified individual who tells the group, Kevin had the Ukrainian prime minister this morning. That is the first line of the transcript. Kevin had the Ukrainian prime minister this morning. Not sexually, didn't eat him for breakfast, nothing like that. He had a meeting with him, is what he means. Kevin had the Ukrainian prime minister this morning. To which Paul Ryan responds, oh, so did I. I just left him in the health care. Unintelligible. And then, okay, says the unidentified voice. And then the discussion begins. So the whole premise of it is, I've just talked to the Ukrainian prime minister, and he told me all this stuff about Russian propaganda and how effective it is there. Kathy McMorris Rogers saying, I actually went there and learned firsthand how much Russian propaganda there is and how crazy it is, how overwhelming it is, how effective it's been. The number of places that they've targeted, the number of people they've targeted, the things they're trying to do. Again, the conclusion that it is maniacal ends up being the meat of the conversation. I implore you to implore everyone around you to please reread that transcript. The Washington Post, for some reason, is making that harder, but we've got it. It's available on the Internet Archive. I've got lots of screenshots of it. You're just going to have to push people to read this thing and jog their memory about what happened in 2016 and what they were actually saying. Put out of your mind the foolish idea that it's really about whether or not Putin pays Trump. Okay, let's jump back to Pocket and try and get to some of the other articles I had stored away for our discussion. Let's see. There are many. And let's pick up this one, by the way. Different tack. I had hoped, I think, never to read aloud a Jennifer Rubin piece unironically, but of course circumstances have changed, and I still have to take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But it's been interesting watching her over the months that she, years maybe, since she's come to the realization that that Trump is horrible and that her interest is in the country versus the party, and so it's good to see and all that. But she has a interesting idea that she posits, and we all ought to be considering it. If Pompeo doesn't testify, and at this point, what would he testify in? I guess they'd have to find a way to revive the Ukraine angle of the inquiry. I don't think that the renewed look at the Mueller report has a Pompeo angle to it. But at any rate, the committee sought to get all sorts of testimony from all sorts of higher-ups in the Trump administration. They just refused to testify, and we're testing their refusals in court right now. But if Pompeo doesn't testify, he should be impeached, is the headline. U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, Gordon Sondland, she writes, implicated numerous senior officials and President Trump himself in a plan to extort Ukraine. No White House meeting until the Ukrainians announced an investigation into non-existent dirt on the former Vice President Joe Biden. The announcement was vital for political purposes. Trump could have cared less if any corruption was going on. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, according to Sondland, played a key role in the plot and in obstruction of Congress. As such, Pompeo needs to appear as a witness or face impeachment himself. That is true. Taking the paragraph apart, I will add this. I happen to notice Elise Stefanik spend some time yesterday insisting that I guess in furtherance of the idea that there couldn't possibly have been a quid pro quo because definitions, insisting that President Zelensky did get the meeting, after all, with President Trump. I believe she was putting this to David Holmes yesterday, and Holmes was saying, well, he didn't say it as clearly as he could have. But what he, I think, meant to say was, well, the promise was of a meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office, which has a particular messaging value that a meeting with President Trump elsewhere, particularly a cursory public exchange of pleasantries, as was what happened at their brief meeting at the UN General Assembly. That is no substitute for a private, classified, substantive exchange on strategic issues with the President of the United States in the Oval Office. Now, I guess to be fair, you're never going to get that from Donald Trump, no matter what country you're from, because there is no such thing as a serious, substantive discussion of critical issues in the White House or elsewhere with Donald Trump. He's not capable of carrying on that conversation. So, what's really of value here, though, there's a particular, but that just makes the case that much sharper, really. What Ukraine was looking for was the PR value, just as President Trump was looking for the PR value of having the highest ranking official possible announce personally that there was going to be this investigation, that he believed that the world could not but take that to mean that Ukraine as a sovereign nation was standing behind the validity of the claim that there was something to be found about the Bidens that would be politically relevant to the United States or anywhere in the world. That was what they were looking for. Similarly, whether or not it really makes any strategic sense to meet with a moron behind closed doors, so long as the moron you're meeting with claims to be President of the United States and the door is that of the Oval Office, that's what they were looking for. The message being, hey, Russia, we have the ear of the President of the United States, and they could provide us with weapons to fight you with. And we had a secret strategy meeting in the place where secret strategy meetings with Americans take place, not in the lobby of the General Assembly of the United Nations, but in the famed Oval Office. We are sitting right here next to the button. We could wipe you out, if I convinced them that you're a danger to the world. We could nuke you from where we're meeting. I don't know. There's some particular PR value to a lot of people about meeting in a top secret kind of setting they're in. I mean, you're in the Oval Office. That's not a top secret. But the doors get closed and we don't tell you exactly what we're talking about because if we told you, we'd have to kill you. That sort of thing. And that's what they wanted. And it's not what they got. But at least Stefanik kept trying to get David Holmes to say, well, he wanted a meeting. Zelensky wanted a meeting with President Trump, and he got it, right? And Holmes was saying he wanted a meeting in the Oval Office. But they did have a meeting, right, at the United Nations? They did. And so Zelensky wanted a meeting with Trump and got it, right? So no quid pro quo. And Holmes was saying, well, no. He should have said no. And he ended up, she just said, well, she did it to him like a prosecutor. Well, Trump met with Zelensky, yes or no? Well, yes, but thank you. So they met. It was really a particularly frustrating point in a very frustrating day of a very frustrating set of hearings. Anyway, that's not really the main point, but it was worth, I think, taking time to point that out. So, Rubin says basically the other point is that Sondland clearly implicates Pompeo as having a major role in all. So lots of people are implicated, but Pompeo does have a major role in it. And it began to take shape for us as early as, early October, when he was saying, I didn't know anything about this call with Zelensky. And then we found out a week later, you were on the call with Zelensky. Something's going on here. Anyway, Sondland made clear he was no rogue actor in the Ukraine plot, something we already knew from other witnesses and from the July 25th phone conversation. In the call, Trump specifically mentions the Bidens, Burisma, and the 2016 election, which is, of course, a reference to the stupid debunked conspiracy theory, which we were just talking about. Pompeo was on that call and therefore understood the link between the White House visit and Trump's political demands. Here's what else we know about Pompeo's involvement. Now it's bullet points, and you know it's serious because it's bullet points. A text from Taylor, Ambassador Taylor, dated July 10th, reflected that S for Secretary Pompeo. I hope. That's what they're saying. Secretary Pompeo directed him to talk with Rudy Kaludi about Ukraine. An email of July 19th sent to Pompeo and a raft of senior officials. Sondland says in it that he had briefed Zelensky for the July 25th call and needed to, quote, turn over every stone, a reference to the Burisma and 2016 investigations, the same investigations Trump spoke about on the July 25th call and in This Morning on Fox and Friends, adding in Biden's name. Next bullet, Sondland, August 11th, email to Pompeo's counselor and top aide Lisa Kenna, stating he had helped draft a statement that would guarantee the, quote, deliverables need to have a big news conference. Kenna said she would pass it on to Pompeo, which in the absence of his testimony, we must assume he read. On August 22nd, Sondland emailed Pompeo directly, talking about a way to alleviate the, quote, logjam, the aid holdup. Pompeo said yes. Pompeo approved the plan, and not unsurprisingly, Sondland testified that because Pompeo listened in on the July 25th call between Trump and Zelensky, he would know what the issues of importance to POTUS were in the investigations into the issues of importance were the investigations, Burisma, 2016, etc. The Post, she says, this is Jennifer Rubin, further summarizes emails from August 11th and August 22nd show not only that Sondland was updating Pompeo on his activities, but that the secretary was approving the plans to get Zelensky to commit to the politically charged investigations. The August 22nd email, Sondland says he hoped that Zelensky could meet Trump in Warsaw and that he would encourage Zelensky to look him in the eye and tell him that by mid-September he, quote, should be able to move forward and with confidence on those issues of importance to POTUS and the U.S. He's still being cagey about it. Hopefully, that will break the logjam, he added. Sondland said he was referring to the 2016 and Burisma investigations, exactly what he'd been referencing earlier that month on August 9th, when he told then Ukraine envoy Kurt Volker over text that Trump, quote, really wants the deliverable. In sum, and we'll just let her sum it up here, Pompeo is complicit. Moreover, he now refuses to testify or produce documents, which likely will complete the picture of what he knew and when he knew it. He's obstructing Congress's investigation and even refusing to recuse himself from the matter. There's more. There's details. I guess we could run all the way through it just to see if it sparks any other thoughts. Former Justice Department spokesman Matt Miller tells me, quote, the bill of particulars that have emerged about Pompeo's involvement are incredibly damning. At the minimum, he knew about the scheme and did nothing to stop it while allowing the president to attack and run roughshod over his people. Miller continues, he should be up on the Hill testifying tomorrow. But we know he won't, because if he had to start telling the truth rather than bullying and blowing off reporters, his answers would be damning to himself and the president. Former prosecutor Joyce White Vance agrees. Sondland put Pompeo right in the middle of Trump's bribery scheme, and Pompeo, who listened in on the call, knew what was at stake. Trump was forcing Zelensky to announce an investigation into the Bidens that was politically valuable to Trump's 2020 campaign. Pompeo, top of his class at West Point and graduate of Harvard Law, knew it was wrong, but he hasn't had the courage to come forward with the bravery of a Yovanovitch or a Vindman. The Sondland testimony puts Pompeo, as well as Trump, of course, squarely inside impeachment territory and under a normal Justice Department in indictment territory as well, says constitutional scholar Lawrence Tribe. There's no OLC memo, suggesting that a sitting Secretary of State is immune from indictment and prosecution. And this one was deeply engaged, if Sondland is to be believed, in a conspiracy to commit bribery and extortion, to violate federal election law against foreign interference, and to obstruct justice, including obstructing congressional investigations. He also notes that Rick Perry is implicated as well, and Giuliani is up to his eyebrows in indictable federal felonies. The House Intelligence Committee should make a criminal referral subpoena Pompeo for testimony, and proceed with impeachment proceedings if he doesn't comply. The message to future secretaries of state must be that they must not participate in illegal schemes or drug deals, right? And that their oath is to the Constitution, not a president. True. For what it's worth, it's Jennifer Rubin that's saying it, but it's all true. And yeah, good reminder. The OLC memo doesn't say anything about indicting or not indicting secretaries of state. I think it might be an interesting exercise. I don't know where it would go, but we could theorize it, think of it over for the weekend. The best, is it maybe the best message, the best thing you could do? Impeach all of them, right? But I would say indict and arrest. Arrest Pompeo. Arrest Perry. I mean, I don't know if you're going to be able to get the Department of Justice under Trump to do that. I mean, ultimately Barr can block all that stuff. But again, in a normal world, indict them and arrest them. Everybody, but honor the OLC memo opinion that the president can't be indicted or arrested while in office, just to highlight the unfairness of it all. I mean, I'm curious you're never going to convince Trump fans, obviously. We say that a million times a day. But I'm curious what it would look like to the rest of, the non-democratic leaning, but not Trump enthralled universe of American voters. It's obvious that something really wrong happened here. And look at the unfairness of the situation. In order to live up to the demands of this stupid memo from a million years ago that doesn't have anything to do really with this current situation, we got a inveterate liar president, a habitual, truly pathological liar in the White House, in the Oval Office. And look at the results of his lies and his demand that he be able to hide behind others for his lies. We are arresting the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Energy, the former mayor of New York City. I don't know if any other cabinet officers would end up getting, but to think about the number of people who are now indicted and facing arrest, who are facing contempt of Congress charges, who have to testify, all because of this stupid memo, which was legally iffy to begin with, basically drawn out of thin air. I mean, it's got citations and everything, but it's a conclusion you didn't have to reach. It was just the most convenient conclusion at the time. Now it's an extraordinarily inconvenient conclusion. The almost entirety of the government is now under indictment and facing arrest. Why? Because we can't just do what we know we need to do. We know the president is guilty of this stuff. We know that it's illegal. We know that we should be impeaching him. We know that that's a political process, and so there are political reasons why it might just not work. And that really our only hope perhaps in all of this is the legal system, which, may not be our hope at all, may not have any hope involved in it if Bill Barr, I keep doing this to poor Bob Barr, but if Bill Barr has his way, and again, it's not, I don't know if it's necessarily an OLC memo, but the same sort of beliefs and materials lead us to believe that, yeah, he can try and do this. It is an attorney general's prerogative to do this stuff, although it's not that it is subject to no review at all, but we'll never sort it out in time for it to make any difference. But can the attorney general just stop all this stuff? He might be able to. But then in a fairer world where it would make more sense, we're relying, again, I guess the best way of saying it, we just hit upon a second ago. We're relying on a memo that was formulated for a similar situation, but that had progressed very differently. And for whatever reason, at the time, it made sense that the solution you were looking for was we just can't indict a sitting president. And maybe it was because they just had more cooperating witnesses and, of course, the real prospect of impeachment and removal of the president when it was necessary. That avenue now we find mostly blocked off from us. But when we're able to get people into a courtroom situation and have them face the consequences of the judicial system without interference for whatever reason, from the Attorney General. We have cases like Paul Manafort and Roger Stone's cases and Mike Flynn's cases and several others, and George Papadopoulos and others who have had to face juries and judges and have been found guilty and gone to jail. But we've promised ourselves that presidents don't have to do this, but for reasons that aren't relevant to this investigation. And now we're stuck with the unfair result of having to arrest everyone else in the country. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. This is the point in the show where I realize, oh my gosh, there's so many more things I need to bring you. I guess I would say that the story I will predict will occupy most people's thoughts over the weekend. It appears that this call into Fox and Friends from the president is very extensive. And there's an awful lot to unpack, and I think maybe people will be spending a lot of time. Oh, maybe it's early enough on Friday that we can burn out on it on Friday and not spend the whole weekend and block out some other explosion over the weekend. But it seems like he's saying things that are going to keep people occupied for the bulk of the weekend. I just happened to see Caitlin Collins, CNN reporter, pulling, I guess, I don't know whether this is her most damning quote or just the one that happened to go by. How about this one from the president? By the way, he says, if I didn't fire Comey, I would be in some trouble right now, Trump says. It turns out to be the best move I ever made, firing Comey, because they were trying to take me down. So just sort of a little confession to obstruction of justice there. But again, I mean, he said it to Lester Holt, and we're still sitting with our thumbs up our asses about this. So I don't know whether it makes a great deal of difference or not, but I mean, maybe now with all that has passed and the polling numbers being what they are, perhaps people will sit and sort through what happened on Fox and Friends this weekend and come to the conclusions that, yeah, this all has to end and this is the end of the administration. I don't know. I don't think so. Nothing else has brought me to that conclusion, but I really want to go and listen to this call now. Anyway, Mike Musson makes an excellent point in follow-up to what I was closing out the last segment with. If I haven't made myself clear, I think the short restatement of it is that the current situation is so bizarre that I don't think the OLC memo should be considered binding anymore. I mean, it never really should have been considered binding in the first place. And maybe it wasn't even a great decision. But for whatever reason, we did things terribly at the time. We did things terribly in Watergate. We became convinced, for instance, many people were not convinced, but I guess the historical consensus became convinced, wrongly, that it was for the best to put the whole thing behind us. The long national nightmare would come to an end. Ford would pardon Nixon. We didn't want the trauma of putting him on trial, et cetera, et cetera. And now, then we're followed up with the OLC memo that sort of seeks to prevent that from happening, blocking off the possibility of ever indicting a sitting president so that we aren't put through this trauma. But we also had systems that dispensed with the necessary measures of justice, the bare minimum necessary measures of justice at the time. Complete and total faith, Barbara Jordan's total faith in the Constitution, was rewarded in that we had a president, I guess, who was eventually too ashamed to stay in office in the face of overwhelming evidence and overwhelming belief that he would simply be removed from office in a matter of time. We don't have that now, and it's a problem, and we might just need to have whatever national trauma they thought they were preventing by indicting a sitting president. We might need to have it. And of course, I guess at the height of the Cold War, there was worry that a distraction like of this sort for the president would lead us into a situation where we would be in danger of who knows what attack, I guess, at the extremes, if we distracted the president from his very important work. This president, of course, does no very important work, has no very important work, couldn't perform the very important work if there was one. And we're on a different footing with Russia as well, not just because it's post-Cold War, supposedly, but because he's Putin's puppet. So, I mean, that may make things dangerous. It might be dangerous for us now. I mean, it might have been perfectly within Soviet Russian interests for us to be indicting our president. It wasn't that they were going to attack at the time. They were just going to sit there and laugh. Whereas now, I guess, what would make Russia attack during the indictment of a president in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s? Nothing. They would say, good, we love seeing the Americans in disarray. This is fantastic for us. Whereas, I guess you could argue, well, if he's Putin's puppet and Putin controls him, our move to make him inoperable would anger the Russians. That's when people attack, when they're angry, not when they're laughing. But okay, who knows about that theory? Anyway, the point is that most of the situation that led us to the OLC memo is missing from this situation, including, and here Mike Musson's point becomes the focus, including the fact that, as he says, the government needs to grapple with the fact, we all need to grapple with the fact, that all these witnesses and the whistleblower originally reported what they saw in the right way, the quote-unquote, the right way, and it went nowhere. Those systems are broken. They caught the president criming, but not just criming, treasoning. They caught the president selling out American leadership in the world, American strategic advantage as the most powerful and therefore most serious country in the world, and exposed the world to the reality that the current commander-in-chief of the United States Armed Forces was an unhinged lunatic with no grounding in reality and no sense of who our real allies and enemies were, a backwards sense of it. It could have left us vulnerable to, turning the keys over to the Kremlin, political union with the Russians to own the globalists, as we like to say on the program. We were in an extraordinarily difficult and dangerous situation, and we're stuck with Cold War era thinking about what to do about it. In addition to the fact that, whatever we've got, the Cold War era, it's a really post-Cold War era system of, whistleblowing and et cetera. But it began before then, but it's been refined since. So it's not the same aging model necessarily on the whistleblowing and reporting portion of the system. But yeah, that system is going nowhere. We have a system where you turn in a president essentially for committing treason or something damn near treason adjacent, and it's just simply, well, all you have to do is count the partisan composition of the Senate to know what's going to happen, and then that's it, nothing. So yeah, that's extraordinarily difficult. It may be that, as far-fetched as it seems, to think that you would get a fair trial of the president in a federal courtroom that he ostensibly controls through his attorney general. It has happened for Roger Stone. And maybe the best thing to do at this point is to see Trump pardon him. Maybe that's what happens over the weekend. Trump pardons him over the weekend, and you say, you know what? That's it. So now we have no branches that can check this president, and we're stuck. And the answer, unfortunately, look to your political theorists. You can't say this stuff out loud yourself, or the Secret Service will come and see you. So go look, quote, now long dead political theorists, both of antiquity and modernity, and ask them what happens typically, political science-wise, when a country, particularly a country that has a tradition of freedom, independence, and rule of law, and freedom, and did I say freedom, yada, yada, finding itself under a dictatorship with no legitimate avenues to check the dictator himself. The executive branch can't do it because that's him. The legislative branch won't do it because they're committed as a party member of the presidency, and as party members, they enjoy the benefits in part of the dictatorship. They're not going to take care of it, even though we gave them that prerogative. And then finally, the judicial branch has taken itself out of it as well. It won't do anything for us. There's no legitimate, peaceful avenue that will rid us of this dictator. What do a proud people do in that situation? The answer is I think if you're Donald Trump, you're allowed to say, maybe the Second Amendment people will take care of it. You're not allowed to say that if you're someone else. So that's not me saying it. No quid pro quo, no quid pro quo. I've just told you. By the way, they should have teased the Republicans mercilessly, I think, during the hearings. Did you ever hear the president say the words quid pro quo? Yes, I did. What? No, you didn't. Yes, I did right here in this phone call. No, but it says no quid pro quo. I know. But you asked me, did I ever hear him say the words quid pro quo? And the answer is yes. It was preceded by the word no. But yes, he said quid pro quo. Here it is. I quote him, quid pro quo. That would have driven him up the wall. I don't know whether it would have worked, but it would have driven him up the wall. They might have punched you. Anyway, the point is, yes, we may be in a situation where the OLC memo logically ought to be considered a dead letter, because one of the reasons behind it was that there was a valid avenue available and that had a serious chance, of being used properly to remove a president who had refused barreled past all of the other checks and balances of our legal system and constitutional system. Now that's gone. So does it make sense to say, well, you shouldn't use this judicial avenue because the legislative avenue is available to you? Well, what if the legislative avenue isn't available to you? Although I'm afraid that they'll say, well, that's just bad luck of the draw. If you want to have that avenue available to you, win more elections. But you're really saying you need to hold the opposing party as a safeguard for democracy needs to be awarded somehow 67% of the Senate seats at all times. Otherwise, we don't have a democracy. That's not a tenable position. So, yes, that needs some work. Okay, let me skip over to some other angles that might become important over the weekend, or maybe at least belong on the record for us. Well, first of all, let's see. A short item. I noticed the tweet yesterday of Max Burns, the Max Burns, Daily Beast reporter or contributor, as well as Democratic strategist, as he notes in his Twitter bio. David Holmes, he says, just described being cut out of an incredibly sketchy meeting between Sondland and Andrei Yermak, who I thought I had heard his name pronounced Yermak at some point, but I don't know how it's supposed to go. But Sondland and Andrei Yermak, where Sondland insisted no one take notes. Just sort of interesting, repeating theme, no notes, right? He says, it's funny how often notes are always missing from key moments in the Ukraine extortion plot. interesting point. Just wanted to bring it up as one of a number of situations where Trumpsters insist on no notes. And remind you that notes, like phone call logs and visitor logs, are things that Trump wants to avoid or have destroyed because he has this very traditional sense of, well, if there are records, that's evidence that can be used against you. I understand that, and I don't want there to be any evidence. Of course, and it's a good move in that it's the sort of evidence that we believe in most strongly in this country, direct record evidence of a thing happening or not happening, although usually we have a record of a call happening, but not the contents of the call. And at best, we then have, in the end, that old evil circumstantial evidence. All you have is evidence that a call took place and that these two people were on it. It doesn't by itself prove that the thing you said you overheard actually happened, but for whatever reason, call logs are extremely important to us. But again, as evidence, they're not really necessarily all that great. What they really are supposedly, they're supposed to be defensive mechanisms for the people in office. That if you commit to the real protocol for logging calls and making calls and logging visitors and keeping notes on things, even though those notes may be used against you at some point in the future, if you are a real administration and you actually adhere to the real protocols, then there's a great presumption in the evidence game, once you get to court or something quasi-judicial like impeachment, that if the record doesn't reflect that such a thing in fact took place, that it didn't. It's not that you can't fake the records. It's that if you can establish that we have adhered strictly to the rules governing logging of visitors and phone calls and taking notes of meetings, then you can make the argument and have people believe it that if there's no record of that call taking place, then that call didn't take place. But couldn't you simply have erased it from the logs? Yes. But if we have a demonstrated record of logging everything, whether it's good for us or not, and sticking to the protocols, the assumption of the normal, rational person is, now, the absence from the records means it didn't happen. Believing that it was erased from the records requires believing in conspiracy theory versus, yes, presidents, for good or for ill, log all of their calls. Now, if you throw that out the window immediately and say, well, we're not even going to do visitors' logs, and we're not going to log the president's calls, and we're going to let him make calls on outside phones so that things don't get logged, and we're going to let the president shred paperwork that belongs under the Presidential Records Act in the archives of the United States, and we're going to let him rip up and eat notes. We're going to let him throw translators out of the room. We're going to let him offer up as valid and genuine call, not transcript, but call readouts that don't actually reflect what was said in the call, but look more impressive as presidential documents. If all of that is out the window, then no, you're not entitled at the evidentiary phase to point to the absence of a call from the call logs and say, therefore, it didn't happen. Ever, in any situation. So really what we have here is a situation where Vladimir Putin, or for that matter, Nancy Pelosi, can say, I heard that the president had a phone call with the Martians and he intends to surrender Earth to them. That's totally treason. And he admits, by the way, in the call, this is totally treason and I acknowledge it and am ready to plead guilty to it. Right? He said that on the phone call. Ordinarily we say, pfft, baloney, show me the records that said he even had a call with the Martians. And it's not there. Oh, it's not there. Oh, well, it was erased. It's a conspiracy theory, a cover-up. Well, maybe, or maybe you're just full of it. That's the presumption of regular record keeping that regular record keeping affords you. He doesn't, he's eschewed, have I used that right? Regular record keeping as a practice, openly. So he's not allowed to do that. Well, the fact that, if I had called the Martians, you would have seen it in our call logs. No, you wouldn't. You're a liar. You fake your logs all the time. Oh, yeah, that's right. Now, I don't know that necessarily leads everybody to believe that he called the Martians and offered to surrender, but it's Donald Trump. So maybe he did. Anyway, just another of those, just another opportunity to remind everybody of what that means evidence-wise, should we ever come to a judicial or quasi-judicial proceeding on this. Other stuff that might perhaps be of interest over the weekend. Let's see. There is prosecutors subpoena Trump fundraisers linked to Giuliani associates. The New York Times bringing this up. I can't read all the way through the piece, but you might want to over the weekend. Basically, the authorities are seeking more information about Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, who worked with Rudy Giuliani. You know all about that. With respect to their campaign finance violations, that investigation now moving forward. And they're subpoenaing the records of America First PAC, to which they directed their $325,000 donation. And subpoenas for subpoenas went to a lobbying firm run by a top fundraiser for Trump, Brian Ballard, and two people who have helped raise money for America First Action, the super PAC affiliated with Trump. So all the people who administer it, likewise, going to have their records searched. So we'll see what comes of that. That's a very interesting avenue. I don't know that it'll occupy time over the weekend. This might, though, and this will interest Armando in particular. I don't know, Armando, do you still listen to the program at all, or are you just like, okay, I'm hiding out from the door. I'm trying to forget about that portion of my life because it was so much fun to call in, and it really was. It's fun to have you, and it pains me to think about not being able to call in, so I'm not going to listen. That would be a wise move therapeutically, I would guess. But we miss you. But he'll be interested in this. I'll message you about it. ProPublica has the piece. Peter Elkind is on the byline. Prosecutors investigating the Trump Organization zero in on Trump CFO Alan Weisselberg. I think this has been a hobby horse of Armando's for a while. Weisselberg is one of the Trump Organization's longest tenured employees and is now co-running the business. He escaped federal prosecution for the Stormy Daniels payments, but is now a focus of an investigation by Manhattan's district attorney. How do you like that? I like it a lot. Hope it goes somewhere fun. Don't know if it's weekend material necessarily, but it's out there. Good observation made by Kai Risdal. I don't know Kai, but Kai, and last name Ryssdal. A verified type of person on Twitter with 178.6 thousand followers. What does he do? I don't know. His email is at marketplace.org. Maybe you know who he is. But anyway, I thought a good observation about the war criminals pardoned by Trump in the last couple of days. Very interesting comparison I saw here, or a thought experiment. This accompanying the New York Times piece entitled Trump Reverses Navy Decision to Oust Edward Gallagher from SEALs. The Navy, if you read through the article, the long story short on this one is apparently the Navy wanted to kick Gallagher out of the SEALs. Okay, you've been pardoned, and apparently you will be reinstated as an active duty naval officer because of Trump's pardon, but the Navy was saying, it might not be the best idea if this guy who committed these atrocious murders and was convicted of it, but now is pardoned of it, if he were in command of a SEAL unit. Because, of course, the members of his SEAL unit all reported him and spoke to prosecutors about it and testified against him at trial, and that was extraordinarily risky for them to do for various reasons. The more polite one being, of course, that they were taking on a superior officer. But the idea is if we all band together and justice prevails, he will no longer be our commanding officer, and we won't have to worry about normal or expected, I guess, not normal, but the normally theorized level of retribution against us. Add, though, the fact that he is a vicious and psychopathic murderer to the picture, and you might say, well, what I don't want now is for all of us to go out in the field with guns. and, get murdered by this guy in revenge for our having put him in jail. I mean, he may think he's kind of crazy. He's a vicious murderer. And maybe he'll kill us all and think he'll get pardoned from that. Or kill us all and say, I don't know, we were just walking down the street and a bunch of terrorists jumped out and killed them all, but they missed me. Do you think that would happen? I don't know. He did some pretty incredibly crazy things. Anyway, so the Navy sought to, they said maybe it's best if we not leave him in command of a SEAL unit. Let's kick him out of the SEALs. After all, it is a prestigious honor to qualify and to be a SEAL, and we don't really want to afford him that. We, of course, convicted him of murder and still believe that he is guilty, despite what the president did here, for improper reasons in our view, perhaps. But at any rate, even if we accept it, because we have to, because he's the commander-in-chief, we don't want him to be commanding SEALs. It's dangerous for everybody. But because they're the Navy, they went to the White House and they said, so what would you think? Yeah, we're thinking about kicking him out of the SEALs. You can pardon him. We'll take him back in the ranks. We'll accept that part. You're the commander-in-chief. But we got to get rid of him as a SEAL. It's just dangerous. And apparently the Navy got signals from the White House. Yeah, go ahead. It's okay. Not our preferred outcome necessarily, but it's okay. It's your prerogative. We get it. Do it. So they began the process, at which point Trump either caught wind of it for the very first time because they kept it away from him, or changed his mind, or forgot what he had said the first time and heard about it on TV. Oh, no, you don't. We're going to block. And so he's blocking the Navy from rescinding, taking away his trident, as they say, the little trident pin that comes with admission to the SEALs. And, okay, so some people said, well, he's the commander-in-chief. That's his prerogative. He can do that. But Kai, I think, puts out a different method of looking at it. He says, okay, think about it this way, right? Naval aviation decides, for whatever reason, that someone who's been court-martialed, say, isn't fit to fly. Or forget it. You don't even need the court-martial decision, right? This person can no longer be trusted to fly our expensive and dangerous airplanes for whatever reason. But the president hears about it on Fox and Friends and says, oh, yes, they are. Is that okay? Is it okay to say this person has become blind in one eye and 60% blind in the other eye, but, in a combat situation, but they're a fighter pilot. They're a naval aviator, served honorably, and everybody loves him. And the president says, you can't, he's so sad. No, you're not going to stop him from flying. Yes, I absolutely insist that he be allowed to take a jet off the deck of an aircraft carrier and try to land one with only 40% vision in one eye. Is that okay? Or do people say, you know what, your decision just isn't valid here, sir. You're making it for very bad reasons, and the safety of our armed forces is at stake? I don't know. It's a good point. It's out there. And what do we say to an organization like the military that takes it very seriously? The commander-in-chief says it, so it goes. Well, is he commanding or is he doing something dumb? Why does he think that it's just because he saw it on television? Did Vladimir Putin tell him to do this? Yes. I don't know. It has been this aviator's lifelong dream has been to strap a live nuclear weapon to his body and attempt a carrier landing at night with his eyes closed. And I'm damned if I'm going to see him denied this opportunity, and I'm the commander-in-chief. What do you say? Yes or no go for this? All right. Just something to think about over the weekend. There's plenty more to think about. We got things to discuss, I know. On Monday, we're going to have to record some shows probably for next week, toward the end of the week anyway. Lots more to discuss. Thank you for hanging in there for the Weird Friday show with a mix of news stories and political science and legal analysis. Let's see. Oh, we'll throw in one more thing here. Arch Pundit sends us this one about Josh Marshall's comment about the thing about the picture hanging in the embassy. The portrait thing, he says, is so funny because it seems exactly like the kind of thing that Rudy Klee, he says Rudes here, or Parnas, or whatever other Ukrainian good fellow would tell Trump, an impressionable, vain dotard, that's right, to get him revved up to can her. Absolutely. On the nose, Josh Marshall. he's a smart guy, and he hits the nail on the head quite a lot, but I usually say, he missed by this much. But that's it. You definitely hit the nail on the head there. I'm in 100% agreement with that. I could absolutely see them feeding that to him. And it could even be a genuine mistake. They were in the wrong room. I thought I would see Trump portraits everywhere. Or just plain lie. But he totally fell for it, and he's, of course, in no danger of falling for the total lies of Vladimir Putin. We'll never find out about it. Okay, wrapping up for the weekend. Did I miss anything? You bet I did. Will justice miss those things? To be fair, you bet that some of those things will be missed. But I can tell you with certainty, as is always the case, many of the things that I missed that are very important for you to hear about over the weekend will be discussed next.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
The international section is always good for the stuff I missed. The chef's table, as he calls it. A Chinese national who worked for Monsanto Bayer AG was charged in St. Louis, Missouri with stealing trade secrets for China. This happens a lot. And something up in Brazil as well. Can't get to the end of it, but always keep an eye on Brazil. He'll do it for you.